Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Human Intelligent Dialogue. I hope you're having a great day, afternoon, evening, depending on when you're checking us out from today. So, welcome back. Today, similar to what we've been doing along the path, talking to different people, getting different perspectives on their experiences and insights as they look to help make their organizations, the clients that they support, more human intelligent from my perspective. So today I have the pleasure here of welcoming Patricia Pope, who is the CEO and president of Pope Consulting, who's been in the business for quite some time. And so I'm not going to talk and take much of her thunder away. I just want to welcome her. And first of all, Patricia, please let the audience know a little bit about you, your background, and the kind of work you've been doing.
Great. Yeah, actually, I'm CEO and Chief Creative Officer.
Okay, cool.
So my oldest son is the president of the company now. So that gives me time to do the creative work that I love doing. So I spent the first 10 years of my career with Procter& Gamble in Cincinnati. It was a great time, an amazing organization. We had a leader who was just really committed to helping people, come into the organization, develop them, be successful, create an inclusive environment for everybody. And so I got hooked by doing that work. I met my late husband there. He was an outside consultant. I was an inside consultant. And so I left after 10 years with P&G to begin working with him to build our company and also to go back to school. So I went back to Pepperdine and got my master's in organization development.
Awesome. Great, great. And so as I was listening to talk about being chief creative officer, it's one of those things I tell whenever I'm speaking to younger audiences, find what you love and have someone pay you for it. And in this case, you've kind of evolved over time, but here you are getting more from the creative side of it. So that's awesome to hear. Thank you so much. So tell our audience, what are some of the trends that you're seeing out there when it comes to human capital and organizational dynamics? Some of the things that you're being pulled into and that you're seeing has some impact nowadays. You and I are now on the outside of the fish tank. These organizations, the people that are working internally, both of you and I were internal, as you mentioned earlier. So, what are some of the trends that you're seeing out there? What are some of the things that you're helping clients out with?
I would say the biggest trend is uncertainty. There's just so much going on everywhere, and things are changing every day, and I think a lot of organizations are struggling. I think there are still a lot of well-intentioned organizations and leaders who want to do the right thing and truly focus on developing people, creating an inclusive environment, but not sure, can we do that and not get in trouble and have contracts slashed or whatever because we used a wrong word or something like that. So, I think, and I were talking earlier, things tend to go through cycles. I remember in the early days at P&G, women would say, we need a women's development program. And so we would create that, and we do that for several years. And all of a sudden, well, I don't want a special program just for women. I want to go through the one the guys are going through. So then, we wouldn't do it for a few years. Then all of a sudden they'd say, you know what, we need a women's development program. And so I think the cycles, the things that we're seeing today, this too shall pass. We've been in business over 50 years. And, I remember the thing that was really challenging was September 11th. Because nobody wanted their people to be on airplanes. Our people were willing to still get on airplanes and go fly and all that. But it's like, people were just frightened. It was unprecedented. And then COVID was another unprecedented event. And so I think what I've learned in business is you have to pivot when you experience those challenging, unprecedented times. And generally speaking, you learn new things and you end up coming back better, being better and stronger, and create new ways to do the things that you love doing. And that's what we've been doing for the last 12, 18 months now.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you for that. And it's interesting you use the word uncertainty. I just presented to the Central Florida Employment Council group, and that was one of the words I showed up there. I said that is the number one word in 2025, and they've tracked it for the last 35 years. The only time that that word was more was during the pandemic. But this is the second highest time in 35 years. So, yeah, that's and to your point, you and I were talking about earlier, things come and go and change. A lifetime ago, when I backed up into this field in the Air Force, communications from leaders was a problem. Fast forward to today, and it's still one of the issues going on out there. So, yeah, it's interesting how we go through these cycles. So, based on this uncertainty and some of the cycles that we've been going through, what are some solutions that you're bringing to bear? What are you seeing as some strategies that are really making a difference when some of these organizations, even though they got a high level of uncertainty and kind of watching out what words to use and so forth. Because I also got some information, as you know, I'm on the conference board, and I was listening to a group that basically said even those organizations that backed off, they've kind of backed off, but more so covertly. They just don't use the terminology as much, but they're still going strong because they know there is a changing demographic, whether people want to accept it or not. So, what are some solutions you're bringing to bear, your organization with clients across the country and across the world?
I think part of it begins with kind of what are the fundamental truths, the things that have stood the test of time for over 5 decades. And I think one of the ones we learned in the 70s is that differences will either be a tremendous source of strength or weakness, but they will never be neutral. And so we talk about them differently today. I mean, we've got 50 years of intellectual property that has stood the test of time, but we talk about it differently. At the end of the day, it's always about, how well are people connecting to one another in the workplace? Because if you don't have connection, you're not going to develop trust. And if you don't have strong levels of trust, then you're not going to be as good at collaboration and innovation and being productive. And so, we're still going to be doing the same kind of work, but talking about it differently than we have in the past.
So, speaking of that, you bring up a really good point. What do you see with the future of work? You hear about remote and hybrid. There's contradictory research. I'm hearing more about, what, at the end of the day, people want to work remote or hybrid. So figuring out how to do it, managers. There's also the whole thing about AI. I just spoke to an audience about the workforce psychology and how that's shifting completely, especially after the pandemic, and the whole workforce evolution that we've watched over time. So based on that, if we want to summarize it down to the future of work, what do you see playing out there with some of those different components that I just highlighted?
Everything that I've read has said that organizations are actually more productive when they have hybrid work. People prefer to work from home. I've talked with somebody recently who said her commute every day was over 4 hours.
Oh my God.
And so that's exhausting. You got to drive 2 hours to get to work, and a lot of traffic and all that creates a lot of stress, and then 2 hours to get home. I feel bad for organizations that have all that real estate that's sitting empty. So I understand their side of it, right? Wanting people to come back. But, I think it's not either or, it's both ends.
Yeah, yeah. And what about the whole AI and workforce psychology? Anything you're picking up there?
We're using it, increasingly in our organization. I mean, it can be as simple as, really trying to craft a great email that you're going to send out that you might spend 3, 4 hours trying to get every word just right. Pop it into AI, you get some great ideas, within 45 minutes. You're like, wow, I feel really good about this. And
Mhm.
so, I think, and you and I have talked, there's a lot of stress about, people are going to lose jobs. I think it'll be the mundane kind of work that nobody really was all excited to do in the first place, and provide opportunities for everybody to elevate and do work that, and they feel better about their, being more creative and producing things that they feel really good about versus doing the menial work that, doesn't really excite anybody.
Yeah, that is so true because PC, which seems like 100 years ago, when it came out, it eliminated 4 million jobs, but it created 20. Now the Economic Forum is saying that yeah, AI may eliminate about 70 million jobs, but it's going to create about 160 million jobs. So, we're working today. Look at us. Who would have done this 50 years ago, where you're somewhere else and I'm here and we're talking like this? That's kind of like the Star Trek thing of back in the day. So yeah, that's going on. And then to your comment about the whole remote and hybrid, I read something where people say they're at least 72 minutes more productive. Well, that's because they're not an hour on the road for one.
Right.
And the other thing is that comes with that, and more people, as a matter of fact, I was reading something about 60 some percent of people are willing to give up a pay cut to not have to go in. Well, that's because they don't have to pay for that gas, tolls, and everything else.
Huh?
So it's really not a pay cut. However, and one of the things you and I have talked about when it comes to inclusion and so forth, the biases that managers show up, all of us show up to the office with sometimes or to the workplace. And one of them is distance bias. So there's some information out there that's saying managers believe that those that are remote and hybrid are less productive and less promotable. Well, that's kind of fighting against yourself because if you're here in Florida and you need the right skill set, do you need them here in Florida? As long if you can get them from somewhere else and they can work and
Mhm.
produce, I think those are some of the things that organizations are having to revisit and look at. You and I have been involved in this field since the 20th century. I think what our clients today and organizations need to adapt to is a 21st century mindset versus that's how it used to be. I had somebody in my session say, well, I had these 60-year-old managers who think we need to be in the office. And I'm thinking, I'm 60 something year olds and I don't believe we need to be in the office. So it's not all of us. It's some, and
Mhm.
it's primarily to your point because of the real estate. So yeah, interesting, changing times, and in some ways, and at the same time, it's similar things as you and I have talked about since we first embarked on this journey. So, what kind of actionable advice for managers, employees, and HR professionals you're providing out there? What would be some takeaways that they're going to hear from Patricia here today that to go, you know what, I want to follow up and talk with her some more.
I think one of the inherent truths in this work that we do is that it's very difficult to understand someone else's reality that's different than yours because it's not yours. And, that's true for all the visible and invisible differences. And so that need to be able to create a safe place for people to share what their reality is that may be different from yours. So you begin to understand some of the challenges they face just in doing the work that they do. I just don't know how organizations can be as productive and profitable as they want to be if they don't create opportunities for people to get to know each other and really understand kind of, where I've been in my life and what I bring to this. And the other thing, the other fundamental truth I've always believed in is that every organization and every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. So organizations would say, we value teamwork, but then they would reward individual performers and wonder why they don't get teamwork. So I see examples of that every day. We see it just everywhere on the news and the stores and everything that we do. So if we're not getting the results that we want, then we need to go backwards and look at what is it that we've set up or established or created that's causing us to not get the results that we want.
Yeah, that's so valuable insight there because I call it, particularly, you and I have been involved in leadership development work, and I call it, some organizations do what I call the car wash syndrome. And that is that if you take a car through the car wash and it's raining, when it comes out on the other side, it's going to be wet and dirty again. Well, the same thing happens if you're developing your leaders to be more participative versus autocratic, and yet what they're getting rewarded for and held accountable for is delivering results no matter what, then of course they're going to go back to what are they getting rewarded for. So organizations really need to look at it from a systems perspective and look at what processes, what things do we have in place to support and enable this new behavior that we want from our managers and leaders out there. Because as you and I have talked about, in the era of AI, HI is still going to be needed. You're going to need human intelligence. You're going to need humanity at the end of the day. And so I think it's going to be important. I see that your mission is we help organizations transform human connection into a competitive advantage. Any closing thoughts or comments you have for our audience?
Just understanding that this too will pass, but what we do today is going to create the challenges that we're going to have to overcome tomorrow. And there are no quick fixes. There just aren't. You got to do the work. You got to create a culture that enables people to feel that they can be who they are, that they can share and be honest without being punished for it, and that they can build connections so that they can work more effectively together with everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that, Patricia. So, to the audience out there, at the end of this, you'll see how to get in contact with Patricia Pope if you'd like to reach out to the Pope Consulting Firm as they continue to help organizations transform human connection through a competitive advantage. I appreciate your insights and your perspective. I also want to make a shout out to a colleague of ours, Beverly K, Dr. Beverly K, who connected us. And it's interesting because I was just speaking to somebody about her book from way back when, Up Is Not the Only Way, where they're talking about organization, career growth and things like that. I said, maybe we need to think about different ways, and this is not a new phenomenon. So,
Right.
to Dr. Beverly Kay, thank you so much for connecting Patricia Pope and myself here. I hope this has been helpful to our audience. If you want to know more about Patricia's services and the type of work that they do out there, you're going to get her contact and information at the end. Thank you for providing some of your perspectives and insights here today. So with that, until the next one. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks. Bye, Edwin.
We're glad that you stopped by to visit. We're in the business of helping organizations in the growing era of AI become more HI, and that is become more of a human intelligent workplace. And we do that in a variety of ways. We can do speaking engagements. I can come in and speak to you either at executive retreats, at offsites, keynotes, things of that nature, to kind of share with you some of the trends that are taking place and what the implications may be for your organization. Sort of in a way, put a mirror up to your organization and say, these are the things that are happening. Are you ready for them? Are you doing something about it? So that's just one way. Another way we do some work with organizations is through executive coaching, helping from VPs to frontline supervisors, those to soon to be in supervisory, high potential individuals, help them in their development. Also do leadership and team development work. And along with that, we use instruments to help organizations from a consulting perspective help themselves, whether it's the Human Intelligent Workplace Instrument or questionnaire to take a sense of, hey, how are we doing in this space? Also, organizational change readiness questionnaire. Are you ready for the changes? What are you missing based on some of this information? And lastly, we also look at leader behavior effectiveness questionnaires. How well are your leaders doing? How do they assess themselves? And how are the workforce assessing them too, whether it be 360 or others? So we're here to help, particularly in this ongoing changing era that organizations are facing, a time of uncertainty, a time where the workplace or the workforce is expecting different things. So hopefully you'll reach out to us and let us know how we can help you out. You can look at some of our information that we have on our website, some of the various podcasts, some of the articles and videos that I've put out there. And hopefully those will percolate and create some thoughts and reflective moments to think about maybe we need to have a discussion with the Human Intelligent Workplace. Thank you very much.